It's Monday night, and tonight I have got a tremendous guest here on Litvak Leadership Live. We're going to talk about what happens when you start a job to make extra money and it becomes a full-blown business. I'm going to talk to the owner of RTI Publishing, Kim Thompson-Pinder. She is the brains behind many books, including Selling from the Heart, Revenue Growth Engine, and yes, your favorite book, Proverbs for Leadership. So without any further ado, hey, Kim, how are you?
I am awesome, Sean. How about you?
I'm having a great day. So let's tell everyone on the front end, the only thing that's not great is my internet connection today. So we are doing this on a hotspot, hoping that it maintains. So if I disappear, people, just hang out. Kim's going to just talk while I'm gone, and then I'll come back if it kicks me out. So letting everyone know.
Oh, yeah. So I could just talk forever. We're good.
So, Kim, you've got a podcast that has how many hundred episodes?
We will be celebrating 400 in August.
400. Now, did you start the podcast before you started RTI Publishing?
No, I did not. I actually started the podcast because of the publishing company.
Interesting. So tell me, at which book, because you've published how many books now for authors?
Well, really one book for authors, but I've published other books, including a lot of low content books. Back when I started writing books, I was in MLM, so I wrote books on MLM. I've got books on a whole bunch of different topics. So I've got one book on being an author. I'm planning book number 2. It's percolating in the brain right now.
Okay.
So hopefully that will be released next year. But yeah, okay. If you consider how many clients I've also published their books and worked on their books, I've probably written well over 200 books.
That's amazing. And when we were working together, I had no idea that you had done that many books. I just knew that Larry Levine and Daryl Amy said, you need to work with Kim. And, that like paved the yellow brick road for our initial conversation. So before I forget, people, if you have a book inside of you or think you have a book inside of you, you need to go to rtipublishinghouse.com, hit the button to set a meeting with Kim. You can send her a direct email at kim@rtipublishinghouse.com. She's real good at getting back to you. And I can tell you that Kim actually reads your manuscript if you've written a book. I had talked to 6 other publishers before I talked to Kim. And after, when we had our first conversation, I sent her the book, and I tell everyone this. And when we got back together about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, she started talking about different parts of the book that she had obviously read and knew how things linked together from one section to another section, as opposed to a vanity publisher that will just take $10,000 from you and then, nickel and dime you for every other little thing along the way. Have I explained that right, Kim?
That's about right. I do have a confession to make to you, though, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
I read about close to half of the book. Juanita actually read the whole book.
Okay. Hey, so half of the book is half more than every other publishing group I had spoken to had read.
But Juanita did read it all. So it was a combination of my notes and her notes because she had more time available than I did.
Well, and frankly, that's even better if you get right down to it, that one person read half of it and another person read the whole thing. So the two of you collaborated and talked before you and I had a second conversation. So it wasn't just what was going on in your head, but it was with one of your trusted associates, what they thought too.
Yeah.
So Your story begins in the wonderful world of publishing, as you posted the other day that you decided to do some editing work to make some extra money. And I want to flash a scripture up here and ask you, how does it relate to when you first started? And here we go. So Matthew 6:33, it's the same scripture I give everybody. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be given to you, from the MEV version. Now, I know you're a faith woman because you're the one who kind of kicked me into faith on the book. Tell me, how does this scripture relate to your book publishing, editing, ownership journey?
Can I back up a little bit?
Yeah,
I got to go
absolutely.
back a little further. The story actually starts when I'm 4 and my mom dies.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
when I was 7, I had my first female teacher, and she was beautiful and she was smart and she was talented. And I wanted to be just like her, but I also wanted her to be my mom. I dreamt every day that my dad was going to marry her and she was going to come live with us and she was going to take care of me.
Right.
And in grade 2, I could finally write sentences. And I don't know if you've realized it yet, but I've got a pretty vivid imagination. So I started writing stories. And do you remember the first time, you did something and you bring it to the teacher and she looked at it and she said, "Oh, Kim, that's wonderful. I love this story." Well, that was all this 7-year-old grieving little heart needed. And I was also, pretty emotionally needy. I mean, every other kid had a mom and I didn't. And so I started writing and writing and writing and writing. I mean, I was handing her piles every day. And I can pretty well guarantee you in the late 60s, early 70s, they did not have courses in teachers' college on how to deal with 7-year-old grieving little girls.
Right. Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
So I don't know if she was married. I don't know if she had kids, but she was pretty young. And I overwhelmed the poor woman. Like, I just emotionally wore her out. And one day she looks at me and she goes, "Kim, you need to stop writing. You're not a good writer."
Oh.
And I carried those words for 30 years, subconsciously.
Sure.
They would be in the back of my mind. I didn't even remember who had said it to me. Like, talk about the goodness of God. So it was just kind of niggling in the back of my mind. Now, fast forward many years, I'm married, I've got kids, I've become an entrepreneur, predominantly in the MLM field, network marketing, direct sales. And I had an opportunity to get a website. Yes. This is back 2011. I wanted a website. I wanted my own website so badly. And my mentor at the time had a deal going that I could afford, and he'd set up my website for me.
Okay.
So back then you could do your own website, but you had to do a fair amount of schooling to do it. Like, it was not easy.
Yeah, you had to type, in hieroglyphics. It
Just
wasn't
about.
drag and drop like it is now.
And so I remember he emailed me and he said, "Kim, your website's ready. We just got to set up your blog." And I'm like, I mean, I've been reading them for a while, but I didn't know what a blog was. So I emailed them back, "What's a blog?" And all I remember from that email was, "You have to write." And in that moment, I was in a God-inspired crisis in my life. Because the first thought that
the verse goes back up now.
Yeah. So the first thought that screamed at me was, "You're not a good writer. You should not write."
Right.
And so that began a journey with God to kind of figure out, where did that thought come from? And I finally remembered what the teacher had said. And, God kind of said to me, "Well, you've got a choice. You can either forgive the person, let those words go, do what I'm asking you to do, or you don't." And I was kind of like, I did a lot of back and forth, but finally I was like, "You know what, God, I can forgive this person." I recognized, I took responsibility for my part. I realized how much I had emotionally overwhelmed her. And I realized she didn't say those words because I was a bad writer. She said those words because it was the only way she could get for me to leave her alone.
Sure.
Right. when you got a class of 30 plus kids and you've got this one kid that's clinging on you, it's not easy to teach. So, you talk about seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And, forgiveness is one of the most powerful things that you can do. So I chose to forgive her and I let those words go. And then it says, all these things shall be given to you. Well, the words started to come slowly.
Mm-hmm.
My first blog post was 50 to 60 pieces of crumpled paper on the floor before I got one blog post written. Of course, back then I wrote everything out by hand, then typed it in. I very quickly got rid of that process because that's really long.
Right.
And I started writing. And everybody loved the writing. And then there's books. And there's a whole long story about books. But needless to say, I came within a hair's breadth. I don't know how many times not writing those first books. And once I finally did start writing the books, the computer almost went out the window. I don't know how many times. And the only reason it didn't was because I'm married to a computer guru. And if I put the computer out the window, we might have gotten divorced.
Yeah, that would be a problem.
So now we come up to 2015 and the time that you're talking about. And my son was getting married. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Not that I begrudge it, but it was a lot of money. And Sean, have you ever driven a vehicle by faith before?
Yes.
So
and I can tell you which vehicle, but that's not what tonight's show is about.
So audience, if you've never driven a vehicle by faith, that's when the vehicle is no longer repairable or it's not worth putting money into, but you don't have the money to buy the other vehicle, the next vehicle yet.
Right.
So you drive this vehicle by faith. You get in, you pray. You go to where you're going. Get in the car, pray you make it back home again. That's the kind of year it was. And I was on a freelance site one day. And I truly believe that if you just, if you listen to the still small voice of God, he'll direct you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on a freelance site and I just got this thought. I mean, it sounded like my own voice, but you get to learn that still small voice that sometimes sounds like yours is God's. And God said to me, why don't you check out writing jobs? And I went, yeah, I could check out writing jobs. And I couldn't believe what people were paying for writing jobs. So I started taking on writing jobs. Randy, I love that. 1972 Ford Maverick was his driving by faith vehicle. And I just took on writing jobs. And within a year, my life had changed. And I had really found my calling. And it was like all those years as an entrepreneur in different ways and different forms. I was not the best entrepreneur. I failed my way forward throughout most of it. And yet at this pivotal moment in time, it started with forgiving my teacher.
Right.
Then with the decision to press through and become an author. And then that decision to take on those writing jobs. Those 3 decisions changed the entire course of my life. And I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't made those decisions. And so I started ghostwriting. But because when I did my own books, I had to learn how to do everything myself. I didn't have any money to pay anybody to do anything. So I spent torturous months learning how to do everything you need to do to publish a book. And because of that, I started getting a lot of jobs, not just writing, editing. I'm not the best editor, Sean. I think you've realized that by now. That's why your book went off to the editing team, because that's not my greatest strength. But I started doing all these things. And within a year, I brought Juanita on. Her first job at RTI Publishing was editor. She was the editor. And I just loved being able to express myself in that way, to be able to create these words for other people that had such a tremendous amount of impact. And I realized that it was my calling, that all of these things that I had done, throughout all of these years, all of a sudden were coming into play. And I started RTI Publishing about a year later. And it has been an amazing journey ever since, including meeting people like Larry Levine and Daryl, and through them, Sean. I loved working with Sean on his book. It was a tremendous amount of heart that he has put into this book. He's very careful with the book. He wanted to make sure that this book was going to help you become that leader that you are meant to be. And it has been so much the journey, and so many awesome people that I've been able to meet during this process. And if you're listening to this right now, you probably haven't realized yet. Oh, there he is. He's back. I was bragging on you a little bit there, Sean.
Well, I can't wait to watch the replay to hear what you had to say. Too funny. So how did you decide to go from blogging and writing like you were to start your own publishing company?
Well, when I started taking on jobs, because I could do everything, because I had to learn how to do everything myself.
Right.
I was formatting books, I was writing books. So within a year, it just really made sense to start a publishing company. Plus, I was getting a lot of work. And so, with the government, I needed to register a business so that I was staying under authority of the government. And I just knew it was what I wanted to do. A year in, I'm like, I'm loving this. Now, I have to admit, during that time, the first couple of years was a really clarifying process, because it made me realize who I wanted to work with and who I didn't want to work with. Because I have to admit, there was a few clients in the beginning that I just took because it brought in money, and, I just took any client, right? And then I learned to interview my clients before I took on the jobs and get to know them a little bit. Because I did have a few people that I did not enjoy. But the whole process of publishing, and what I fell in love with, was the fact that people like you and Larry and Daryl and all the others, you had important messages that you wanted to get out into the world. And I could help you take those messages and get them on paper and get them in a form that other people could read. And that has always been the heart of RTI Publishing, is being able to take your words and the others' words and make them into books that change people's lives.
So who do you actually say no to when people, because I know one of the first conversations we had was you said, there's no guarantee I'll take you on as a client. So what would keep you from taking on someone as a client?
It's hard to define, but I have to feel like there's synergy, like there's a kindred spiritship between me and the client. I see myself as a trusted partner in the process.
Absolutely.
Not someone you just hire and you stomp on. And so throughout, the beginning process of the book, if I'm feeling like I'm just kind of being used and abused, then it just stops. Because that's not what I'm looking for. It's obviously I need to make money. I need to pay bills. I need to pay my employees, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But money is not the main motivation in this business.
Okay.
So if I feel, either in the interview or, in the very beginning process that, there was not a lot of synergy, or if I feel that this person might be not abusive, but definitely not nice to my the people in my company, I'm not going to let that person work with them.
Sure.
Because the money's not worth it. I'll give you an example. This was quite a few years ago, and I definitely will not be using any names. But I had a lawyer approach me, and he wanted me to write about his life. And morally, ethically, the things that he had done, I could not write about. The things that he supported. I mean, he didn't do anything illegal, so it wasn't like he was breaking the law. But the types of people that he fought for, morally, I could not support. And I was in a real dilemma because this guy's a lawyer, so I had to be really careful what I said. And that's when I really prayed. Like, I was praying, I'm like, God, you like, I can't move forward with this, but I got to be careful how I tell this guy no, because he's a very high-end lawyer. And so God gave me the right words to say to him.
And did he accept it gracefully, or was there some, back and forth?
There was a little bit of pushback, but I was pretty firm. Like, I didn't give him any room. Even when he pushed back, I didn't give him any room. The thing is that throughout this process of even just getting him a quote and finding out, he was really pushy. He was manipulative. Like, I got something to him 10 minutes late, and he was, guilt tripping me. And so I just decided that was someone that I did not want to work with. And God was really good. He gave me the right words to say so that, this gentleman just decided that I was not the right person that he wanted to work with. So I was really, really thankful about that. But I want to work with people who see me as a partner. I want to partner with people to help them get these books out and be able to use these books to build their businesses. Sean and many of my other clients are almost like extended family. Hi, Sean, you're back. I just kept talking.
I'm back. So you got something to him 10 minutes late?
Yeah, and he sent me an email guilt tripping me.
Yeah.
That was one of the first warning signs. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that is problematic. I mean, I just don't see how someone can be. Look, I mean, and I've talked about this when Kim and I first started working together. It was before I had heart surgery, and then in the middle of it, I had heart surgery. And at one point, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll get this to you in a week." And I don't think contacted you or anyone who worked for you for about 7 weeks. I just went off the grid, and you guys were like,
Sean, if you remember correctly, I said to you, you're not going to be getting me anything next week. And you're like, oh no, I will. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to let you think that, but I know better.
Yeah. And I think I would send the occasional email going, I'm still here, but I'm just not focused at the moment. And you were like, yeah, obviously. So how do one thing that you did that really impressed me, and I tell people about all the time, is when I sent you my manuscript, one of the first conversations we had was you recognized that there was scripture throughout the whole book. And you told me that I needed to either cite the scripture or I needed to remove it all. And either way was fine, but I couldn't just walk down the middle of the road like that. So when you knew you were going to have that conversation with me, A, how did you prepare for it? And B, how did you think I was going to respond?
Well, here's the thing. I always have to tell the truth to my clients.
All right.
And so, sometimes, like in your situation, I knew you well enough by that point. I wasn't too, I was concerned about having the conversation because I didn't I didn't want you to feel overwhelmed by it, because yours is a fairly large book and there was a lot of scriptures in it. So and the thing was because the way you had them laid out, there was really no way for us to do the work. You were going to have to do the work. That was my
Right.
biggest concern, because I'm like, yeah, like for us to try and figure this all out was not going to work.
Right.
But I knew, like, you and I had a good enough relationship by that point. I'm like, listen, we're going to figure this out. And so it's like, okay, we've got to address this. Let's just address it. I don't, to be honest, unless it's like a really difficult conversation where I have to really, I had a situation recently with a client, and sometimes you don't realize what the person's really like till you get far enough in the project that you can't stop. And it was one of those situations, and I did have to have a serious talk with one of my clients and basically tell her to back off because she was stressing everyone out. That conversation I prepared for. Sean, to be honest, yours, it was like, okay, this is not going to be fun, but we have to deal with this. Let's have the conversation and we'll figure out a game plan from there. But Sean, you were wonderful to work with. So both, everyone who in my company that worked with you, they loved working with you. You were so easy to work with. Because you came at it with the right attitude. It's like, okay, we've got to deal with these things. I want to keep this project moving forward. But you weren't blaming anybody. You're like, okay, here's my expectations. Here's what I'm hoping for. How do we make this happen? It's not, you're not doing your jobs and I'm, this book's never going to get published and whatever. You just kind of took everything in stride and said, okay, this process is taking longer than we thought. We'll readjust the schedule, but let's just make a plan and keep working towards it. And yeah, you were off for a little bit with your heart thing. And Juanita and I were like, yeah, he'll come back when he can.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the book ended up being published probably 9 months later than we had originally planned.
Yeah.
And I remember towards the end of it, we were either going to publish in the middle of December, but we made the strategic decision to kick to the end of January because it would have been too compressed. Yeah. And the end of January gave us more time. So, yeah. I mean, you definitely walked me through that process. So when someone has a book or has an idea for a book, before they come talk to you, what should they be doing as opposed to just coming and go, I want to write a book about this? I mean, I'm sure you'll talk to anyone at any time initially, but what would be the most helpful? Like, I showed up with a manuscript, which you had said was almost a bad thing. It might have been better if I had come with less of a manuscript as opposed to what I showed up with.
Okay, so you and Daryl have the same thing. You are extraordinary writers and your word counts are awesome, but usually a little bit too long. So, yeah. And that's not a bad thing. What we found, it's not that it's harder to work on your books, it's just a longer process. It's easier to write something from scratch than to try and go back and fix what somebody else has written, because then as soon as you take something out, you've got to rewrite transitions. You're trying to keep it in the client's voice. It's just a longer process to edit a book that's already been written than to start from scratch. So it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just it's a longer process. And I don't remember the other question you asked me, so I'll let you say it again.
Well, what should people, if someone thinks they want to write a book, should they begin with an outline and come to you? Should they just come with an idea? What is the best way to approach it?
So first of all, I only do one specific type of book. So I'm going to address it from that because different types of books have different processes. The
Okay.
books that RTI Publishing do is for consultants, professionals, speakers, coaches, thought leaders. And these books become valuable marketing tools, not only valuable to the client, but valuable to the reader. These books are about delivering your message to the world, a message that is going to help people change their lives in a very specific way. So when I'm looking at clients, there's a few things that I'm looking for, and few things I'll usually ask in a conversation. The first thing is do they have a target market? You and I had this conversation at one point because you're like, well, I want to add this and I want to add this. And my first response, well, Sean, that's book 2. But the second response was, you're writing, who are you writing this book to?
Yes.
So if you write a book to everyone, you'll write it to no one.
Yeah, that is true.
Right? But if you write the book to somebody, it will mean something.
Absolutely.
So you want to have a well-defined target market. You want to know who it is that you're writing this book to. And when you think of this book, yes, many people are going to read this book. But when someone picks up a book, it's them reading the book by themselves. So when you're thinking of that book, you have to think of that one person that you want to read the book. So having a well-defined target market, having a good, strong message. You need to know what differentiates you. What is the message that you want to share with the world? You had Proverbs for Leadership. Larry had Selling from the Heart. Daryl, Revenue Growth Engine. One of my other clients. Okay. His is probably the most specific book I have ever done. And his book was How to Get a Sales Job.
Okay.
It was very specific. And he had a very specific target market, like a very niche down market. And so you need to know what your message is. So this is why, if you're just starting out in business or consulting or whatever, it's probably not a good time to write a book. You want to have sort of established business with, a good established clientele. You need to know what product and services you want to sell. You have to have sort of your core message that you want to share with the world, something that's powerful. It doesn't have to be unique, but it has to be uniquely said by you. And so there's a difference. The other thing is that you have to have a good understanding of your own story, because you're going to be interspersing this story throughout your book. So I call it your business story. This is not usually in these books. Now, in some books, there is some aspects like you can kind of maybe see there. The one book on the one end is by Sherry Lewis, another friend of Larry Levine's. And her book is called My Skeletons Have Names. Now, her book is predominantly story with a bit of teaching training. She has more lives than the cat. She was abused from the time she was small into her 40s. She married 3 narcissistic husbands. The 4th man she was with almost killed her. Wow. She was homeless at 17. She was addicted to drugs and alcohol. She had 3 kids, I think, from 3 different men. And her kids were involved in a terrorist attack. Anything you can imagine has happened to her.
Yeah, sounds
writing her book was every day was just like, seriously, Sherry, like it was just incredible. But it was her story about how she not only survived all this, but how she's learned to thrive. And so her message was very strong that, your past can't define you. Now you have to deal with your past, because if you don't deal with your past, it's just going to stay there and, it will destroy your life. But you can't let your past define you. So you have to have you either have to have a really strong teaching training message, or you have to have a really strong message in your story. So the books that we do are a combination. Now, Sherry's book, and there was another lady, Nin Riffit, her book is called #Her Rhythm. She grew up in Pakistan, married a very rich man. He mentally, emotionally, physically abused her. She had 2 kids with the gentleman. She found out he was trying to have her killed.
Oh my.
So she had to escape to the United States with her boys. So that's her story. So those books are more story than teaching and training. And then you have books like sort of on the other end. Obviously, How to Get a Sales Job is like 90% training and 10% story. You've got books like Larry's and Daryl's, who are mostly teaching and training with stories interspersed in the middle, throughout it, to demonstrate what they're saying. So you want to have a good understanding of your story and know that you can convey your story in a way that would relate to the people who are going to read it. So if you have those things in place, if you have that strong target market, if you've got this strong message, if you have a really good understanding of your story, those are all really good foundational pieces that are going to help you to be able to put together a solid outline for your book. And so when I have those conversations, those are the types of questions that I ask.
Sure.
And now, depending on the answer, sometimes I can tell people aren't ready. And I'll tell them that. They're a group of people that I say no to. And I'm just very honest with them. I just say, you know what? I don't think you're ready yet to write a book. Work on these things, maybe get some more experience in your business, figure some of these things out, and then, come on back to me, because it's not about the money. Yeah. It's about creating a good book. So I say no to people.
Well, and it's about the message, I think, that if you've got a strong message, and look, Larry's book and my book are all about putting other people first in one sense or another. And people have asked me, how many books do you want to sell? And my answer is, well, a lot. But that's the short answer. The long answer is I want to help a lot of people. And I think if people read my book, it will help them. But I've given bunches of books away already to people. And when I'm traveling for my employer, I carry books with me. And I've just given books to different people that I've met and said, hey, let me sign this for you and give it to you. I wrote this book. And when you're handing someone a book with no ulterior motive other than to bless them, it is powerful in what it says to them, but the emotion that I feel, at least, and what I realize I'm doing is something that is a growth moment each and every single time that I do it.
Yeah, see, there's a misconception out there. And the misconception is that you make the money from selling the book. Well, first of all, that's not going to happen. If you expect to get rich off of the sales of your book, first of all, to get enough sales to get rich, you'd have to have a marketing team. So any profits you would have made on the book, you just spent on marketing it.
I mean, even Prince Harry is probably not making a lot on the book because of all that they had to do to promote it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, if you're selling millions of copies and you're even making $1 on a million copies, that's still a lot of money, right?
Right.
But when you're a smaller business and you're forking out a lot, and I mean, he would have gotten a fair amount of marketing for free because of who he is. But you're not going to make a lot of money on the sale of the books. Now, That being said, so people are like, well, then what's the point of writing the book? Well, I'm so glad you asked. The credibility that you get from becoming an author will allow you to build your business faster.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a huge credibility piece to say that you are an author. It rises you above other people who do the exact same thing that you do. So a story that I often share, and this happened to the lady before I met her. Okay, now she has since become a friend. She uses my services, but what I'm about to tell you, I was not involved in. I was just starting to think about ghostwriting at that point. She caught hepatitis as a child from a blood transfusion. Didn't know she had hepatitis until she was in her adulthood. And when they diagnosed her, they did not have a name for hepatitis C. So it was called non-AB hepatitis. So they didn't even have a proper name for it at that point.
Okay.
So over the years, she had learned to deal with it by making lifestyle changes. So this is probably now about 2013. I think she's in her 50s at this point. And she decides that she wants to write a book. She's just learned a lot over the years about how to naturally deal with hepatitis. Not that it cures it, but how can you live a lifestyle so it's not flaring up all the time so you can actually have a life?
Right.
So she decides to write this book and she starts writing it. Well, she got so excited, she started telling people about it. Well, word got around that she was writing a book on hepatitis. And she got invited. She was on radio. She was on TV. She got invited to speak at the largest hepatitis conference in Canada.
Before she wrote the book.
Yeah, she was about 3/4 of the way through writing the book. There were doctors who had been trying to get on that stage.
Huh.
And because she could prove that she had written 3/4 of the book, they let her on the stage over a doctor. Now, I am not saying that if you write a book, you're going to get on television, you're going to get on radio, or that, all of these things are just going to fall into your lap. So let's be really clear on that, okay? Because I'm not this Field of Dreams person where you write it and everything comes to you.
Right.
The right people just happened to hear about her writing this book. But the difference was that doctors could not get on that stage because they had not written a book, and she got on the stage because she had written 3/4 of it.
Oh, I mean, I will tell you, and I haven't talked about this publicly at all, but I've been invited to and been contracted to do a keynote speech in January for an association of a group in the manufacturing industry building homes. And I am humbled. And it's their annual convention, and they have like 300-400 people there. And
I'm so excited for you.
And they specifically invited me to do it. There is a gentleman I know who sits on the board of this group, and when they were talking about who they could have come in to do the keynote, he talked to them about my book, and there's a lot of faith-based individuals in this association. And, he told them, he's like, Sean is one of you, and he'll be able to get up and talk to you about business, but he's also going to do it from a faith perspective. And it's not going to be like going to a church service, but you're definitely going to get business and faith all at the same time. And when they asked me to do it, it was like kind of a,
jaw drop
moment. And I was like, well, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Can you give me the details? And he gave me the details. And I then did my happy dance. And, 2 days, but I chilled about it. And two days later, I said, oh, yeah, I'll do this. Absolutely. So, and that is the beginning of what will hopefully be some very interesting encounters over my lifetime, all because I was obedient to God and wrote Proverbs for Leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you, actually. Was what were some of the results that you've seen from the book? Kudos to you, Sean. I love it. I love those stories. I'm going to have you on a LinkedIn Live to talk about it.
This. Not told us so well. My wife knows about it, obviously, but other than
now the whole world does.
Huh?
Now the whole world does.
Now the whole world knows. So I thoroughly encourage people to dig deep, and like you said, you've got to have a message. You've got to have a why, and this is my big thing lately. I just finished Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I would call it an old book. I don't know, maybe it's 10, 15 years old, and it's really made me think about, not what, not how, but why. And it just dovetails so well into Proverbs for Leadership or any other book that someone is going to read or write that has a message. There needs to be a why. You need to be helping people achieve. So we've gone 47-ish minutes since I've probably been gone for 5 or 8 minutes of it, bopping out. Kim, it's great to see you. You and I have not talked in a while. I'm going to flash up here for everyone again that they need to go to your website, rtipublishinghouse.com. Don't go to RTI Publishing. There is no website like that. It's just RTI Publishing House. Or you can email Kim at rtipublishinghouse.com and tell her your book idea, and she'll let you know if she's willing to work with you and bring you through the process, because that's what you're going to do, a lot of work, but Kim knows the road you need to walk down. So Kim, final word to you. What is your last bit of advice for someone that has a burning desire to write?
Don't let fear stop you. And your first book may not be your best book.
John Maxwell has said that.
Because if you're not used to writing, but here's the thing, with practice, everything gets better. Yep. But don't let the fear of what people will think of your writing stop you. Because you know what? That's what a good editor and publisher is for.
There you go. Ding, ding. All right, everyone. This has been Litvak Leadership Live. We're going to be back next week with a very special guest for episode 199, which is kind of like episode 200 if you count the pilot episode. So, Kim, again, thank you very much. Have a great evening, everybody. See ya.